الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today we're going to be talking about disciplining the soul or purification of the hearts. This is of the most important matters of the Sharia. In fact, it is one of the principal reasons Sharia exists, to discipline the soul or to purify the heart. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says regarding the hearts, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفُعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَىٰ اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. That on that day when money and wealth will not benefit anyone, the only thing that will benefit someone will be a sound heart. And we hear the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam, where he, after building the Kaaba with his son Ismail, he made a dua. He said, رَبَّنَا وَبَعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُونَ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. And in this dua, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he makes a dua for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, in my generations to come, raise from amongst them a messenger from them own selves. And what will be the three maqasid? What will be the three objectives of this messenger? He laid them out. يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ, that he will recite your verses. Number two, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ, and he will teach the book, the revelation, and its contextual application. And the third objective of this messenger that will come, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and he will purify them. So the whole purpose of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the primary purposes that the Sharia exists for, is this concept of disciplining the soul, or tazkiyatun nas, or tasawwuf, whatever you want to give its official name, the purification of the heart. It's of the principal purposes the Sharia exists. It's one of our main focuses of our life. No matter whether you're an alim or a lay person, it makes no difference. Everyone has to know this science as it pertains to themselves. So this shows its importance. And so we're going to go through a couple of practical tips as to how we can approach disciplining the self or purification of the heart. So the first, we're going to go through seven points of benefit. The first is the relationship to the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. He says, do they not reflect or ponder? يَتَدَبَّرُونَ, do they not reflect, tadabbur, over the Quran, or are there locks upon their hearts? So tadabbur is to have quiet reflection time. When you read the Quran, you reflect upon the verses. You reflect upon the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We live in an age of constant stimulation. Our senses are always being stimulated, but the human brain is not designed for that. We need to receive information, and then our brain needs downtime to process it and organize it in our minds. And so in this age of constant stimulation of devices, billboards, TV, whatever it might be, our brain never gets that time to process. And so if one of the sources of disciplining the soul or purifying the heart is to take quiet time to just sit and reflect, then we can see in our modern time we are severely lacking this quality, to just take quiet time to reflect. You can do it on anything, but especially over the verses of the Quran, to just have silent time to reflect. The wife of Abu Darda radiallahu anha, she mentioned, she was asked what was the most common act of worship she saw her husband doing, Abu Darda. She said, just quiet tafakkur and tadabbur, quiet reflection and pondering. That's what she saw her husband doing the most. So that is something to reflect on over in and of itself. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Man a'arada an dhikri falahu ma'ishatan dankar, fa inna lahu ma'ishatan dankar. Whoever turns away from my remembrance, then he will have a constrained or difficult life. Wa nahshuruhu yawm al-qiyamah a'ma, and he will be raised on the day of judgment blind. And so a constrained life is not constrained in terms of resources. It's talking about constrained life within people's chests, within their hearts and their minds. And we see that today with the rise of mental health, psychological conditions. People have got more material resources than ever in human history. Yet people seem to be more despondent, more depressed. So how is that? So it shows that material possessions is not what it's about. It's of having richness of soul, freedom in the heart, and that's what we are lacking today. The second, so that's connecting to the Quran and reflecting about life and the verses and the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 2 is consuming less food. Consuming less food. This is from the adab and the methods to purify one's heart. Imam Ghazali has got a chapter in his Ihya al-Ulumuddin, in his revival of religious sciences, called Kasru Shahwatain, breaking of the two desires. Breaking of the two desires. And he's talking about the desire to eat food and the desire for the sexual desire. He says these are the two desires which are at the head of everything else. And if you can control these two things, then you will find the other desires easy to control and maintain. And we look at Adam alayhi salam in Jannah. What if we look at the relationship between these two concepts? Adam alayhi salam, it was impermissible eating that led to the exposure of nakedness. So there's a direct link between eating in a haram way and the exposure of nudity and nakedness. And this is something we have to focus on and not take lightly, because we live in a time where our desires can be satisfied in any number of ways, just food and drink by itself. And so we have to actively try and reduce, consume less, even halal things. I mean, things that are permissible, we don't necessarily have them all the time. If you want to have a healthy body, you have to forego certain luxuries and desserts and sweet things for the sake of a better body. What about for the sake of a better heart? That the one who wants to control their desires, we have to abstain and maybe eat and consume less. The third point is taking benefit of the night prayer. And I mention this specifically because it is winter. And we know the last third of the night is the night, part of the night where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers du'as, and a slave can be the closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's last third of the night. And in winter time, if you to split from Maghrib to the start of Fajr, it's approximately 4.5 hours per third. 4.5 hours per third. So most people tend to go to bed quite late, generally. Well, if you are one of those people who go to bed late in the winter, then it's a perfect time to, before you go to bed, is to make advantage of praying in this last third. This last third will fall 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, when many people go to bed. So it's something that people can take advantage of, praying 2 rak'ah before they go to sleep. And they will get this qiyamah in the last third of the night. The fourth one is linked to this is dua, making dua at this special time. Because at the end of the day, if we want to have a better self, a better heart purification of ourselves, being closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we must make dua for it. We must make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us in our understanding and knowledge and application of what we know to come closer to Him. And because dua at this time, the last third of the night, is a special time for dua, it's a time we should be using to ask Allah to help us. And really in anything in life, if you want something in life and you're not waking up, or you're not using the last third of the night to make dua for it, then you have to question yourself, do you really want that thing? Because if you really wanted it, and you knew that this time is like the golden time for du'as to be answered, then you would be using that, and I would be using that. And so if we want to purify our hearts, which is the most important purpose of this sharia, then we should make dua at this time, seeking Allah's guidance constantly, Allah's tawfiq and divine assistance in this monumental task. The fifth one is benefit of, fifth point of benefit is our company, the people we hang around with. And so this is something we have to watch, because we are upon the deen of our friends. So if our company is positive, then that will rub off on us, and likewise the other way around. Now, it's not about cutting people off for this, just anyone and living a hermit life, but it's something that we need to judge ourselves. Are we bringing more benefit to our company, or is our company impacting us more? And if our company is impacting us more, then you better make sure it is positive benefit. I mean, it could be the case that maybe the company is not as good, but you are able to influence them. So you have to look at what influence, where is the influence going? Are you benefiting other people, or are they influencing you, and take appropriate action? But do not belittle the effect that our company has upon us. The sixth point that we can focus on to learn to discipline ourselves and to purify our hearts is to remain silent and leave that which does not concern us. To leave that which does not concern us. It is of the sources of hardening our hearts is to be concerned in other people's business that does not directly influence or have any impact upon us. And with the social media age and passing messages and this, having a WhatsApp feed, YouTube feed, everything is put in your face, things that have just got literally nothing to do with us. And just scrolling through our feeds, we have to be careful that we're now looking at things constantly being impacted by things which have no benefit or no interest or nothing to do with us. And this can harden our hearts, something to be very, very conscious of. Not just gossip. It can be anything that has nothing to do with us. And the more we can kind of control what we expose ourselves to, the better we will impact our internal condition. And the seventh and final thing to benefit our hearts and our purification of ourselves is eating halal food. So we mentioned about eating less, that's one thing, and related to that is eating halal food, because there's a famous saying in Arabic, at-ta'am bidru af'al, that the food is the seed of action. Food is the seed of action. Meaning what seed you plant inside yourself, the fruit will be according. So if you put that seed of halal inside you, the fruit of af'al will be, of your actions will be good and halal. But if you feed yourself with haram, then that's going to lead to haram actions coming out. And likewise, if you feed yourself with doubtful things, then the actions are going to have that tinge of doubtfulness and suspicion about them. And so being conscious about what we eat and how much we eat, this is a very important part of the life of a Muslim. And generally, these are just 7 points. I mean, there's many more, but the general principle of to discipline, the word discipline, even in the secular context, is to just hold back from things. To hold back, to restrain. And it's not about becoming a hermit, it's just that control. Eat food, but just eat a bit less. Have fun, but control it. And so this restrain, having this aspect of restraint in our lives, having fully engaging in the world, in social life, in entertainment, eating, etc. We have to have to detract from all of these things is not natural. We're going to be part of all these things, but the quality is of a believer that they have this ability to hold themselves back and control in each area of these lives. So we don't want these extremes. Someone who's just doing whatever they want, eating, socializing without any, and just living an entertainment culture, consumer culture, without any consideration, is this the right thing or not? And then you've got people on the other extreme, just hermits, don't take any part of life, thinking that this is part of Sharia as well. And this is wrong as well. But the correct way of disciplining the self is to have that control, that wherever you are in life, you're able to manage your own heart and be sensitive to the impacts in your heart. The human heart, the spiritual heart, is like the fingertip, is like the fingerprint on our fingertips. It's unique to every person. My heart is not different, is not the same as yours. Every single person's nature is different. Some people have got a lot more anger. Some people suffer from desires. People find it easy to hold their tongue. Other people find it very difficult to hold their tongue. And then on top of that, our natures are different. Then our life experiences are all different. People grow up with families. People grow up with full normal families. People grew up in broken families. People have had loss. People grew up in wealth, in poverty. And so imagine the variances in human nature and then the variances in external situations means that no person's life is the same. And so we have to all, whilst these points are generic, we have to be sensitive to our own hearts and see how are different things affecting us and make that judgment call. Someone who suffers from a lot of anger may have to deal with themselves in a different way to someone who doesn't deal with a lot of anger. This concept of the same solution for the same person that will result in the same results is a very dangerous thing. It's a very dangerous thing. It's a nuanced thing. It's like medicine. Not if you have the same medicine for the same person at all times for every illness, you're going to kill half the population. And so likewise, the spiritual illnesses are even more nuanced. And it's very important, I think, in our modern day and age, because the very concept of disciplining the self, it's not even discussed anymore. In fact, when the change to modernity from the traditional core values, when this occurred can be debated, but one of the points is when God was removed from the center of, or the locus of all, the reference of all good. And when God was removed, as the famous saying goes, man was the measure of all things. The man, human insan, was put, that good and evil and verifying what can be done, what should not be done, is all in the hands of insan. And this can be looked at as a time of flicking over into what's called modernity. But we see this about 200 years ago, 250 years ago, by putting mankind at the center of all things. We look now 250 years later, what's it resulted in? It's resulted in actually the destruction of man. In what sense? Meaning the atheistic worldview, a very popular worldview amongst the atheistic community, secular community, is that the self does not exist. It's an illusion, because that which cannot be subject to the scientific method, meaning the physical laws, doesn't have any physical makeup in its essence, and it can't be subject to the scientific method, it's not real. And so the whole concept of a non-physical soul is dismissed. And so imagine the concept of a self. They say it's an illusion created by the brain through evolution. And so the whole concept of a self has been removed, so that sacred, or that the man being the measure of all things, now that man does no longer exist. That man, that self, that person, that individual that's been put at the middle of all the locus of everything, has now been defined that it no longer exists. The self is an illusion. Likewise, free will, hard determinists, people who believe in determinism, they do not believe this is atheistic, nothing to do with religion, believe everything is determined. There's no such thing as free will. And this is not a minority position amongst secular atheist community. There is no self and there's no free will. And so 250 years later, we see the destruction of the self, the removal of the individual. And so not only do we live in a time where we need to focus on the purification of our hearts as a Muslim community, we have a wider non-Muslim community who are denying its very existence. And so it becomes even more important to understand this science, implement it ourselves, and then be a source of guidance for other people, because that's what we've been sent for. We have this Sharia to help other people. And it would be under the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, idfa' billati hiya ahsan, push back with that which is better. People are claiming there is no soul, the self is a total illusion. We have to push back with that which is better, the solution for humanity, for mankind. And that is that's the very existence we exist. So it's even more important in our time. So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us, enlighten our hearts, and give us knowledge to be able to purify our hearts. بارك الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.